Debbie from So Easy and welcome. Today we're going to be sewing the all in a flap bag. This is the bag here. It's a fold over bag which has a separate flap, and I've made two versions. This is just a clutch, so it doesn't have any kind of strap. This one I've added a short strap to it, but it's removable, so I can just hang this over my shoulder if I want to go hands-free. If we have a look at the features of the bag, it's got a metal zipper just here, but if you prefer you can just use a regular nylon one, that will work too. And then when you lift up the flap, if you buy more than you intended, you've got a little bit of extra storage. You can use the bag like that, but most of the time you would just open the zip to access the bag. I've not added any pockets to this one. If you want to, you can add some pockets. It does have a contrast strip on the back with a zipper pocket that you can access from the outside if you want to. I've done the same on this bag, but this is just an optional extra. If you prefer not to have this, you don't have to. So those are our all in a flat bag that we're going to sew. Let's get started. So let's just talk a little bit through the materials that I'm using. I've got a ready-made strap for mine, which already comes with the little clips and the D-rings. If you want to, of course, you can make a fabric strap, make some kind of adjustable strap, but I just want a strap that I can clip on and off, and just a short one so that I can hang the bag over my shoulder. So I've got this ready-made one, and I'll provide you the link if you want to use something similar. I'm also using some different types of fabrics. This is going to be my lining. It's just a plain quilting cotton. Then for the outside of my bag, I'm using a few different materials today. For the lower part, I'm using a vinyl. This is a marine vinyl, so it's a little bit thick. It has this fabric kind of backing on the back. And because it's already thick and reasonably stable, I don't want to add any kind of additional interfacing or fleece or anything with my vinyl. If you're just making yours out of a quilting cotton, of course there's a lot of difference between a quilting cotton and a vinyl, so you'll probably want to add some interfacing to your bag. So while we talk a little bit about interfacing, let me show you this one. This was one of my early prototypes for this bag. Normally when I'm designing a pattern, I'll sketch it all out on paper and make up several mocks. This was my the first one using these actual materials, and as you can see, it's not really much of a fold over bag because I've made it far too stiff and it won't fold over very well. This one had, on the outer fabric, it had an interfacing and a fleece, and I think that is too much to use on my fabric. So if you want a fold over bag, it has to be reasonably soft, otherwise it won't fold over. It's going to kind of stand up like this one and look a bit silly. So, so don't do that. So I also have this, which is like a faux suede, I suppose. It's slightly sueded and embossed, and again it's a little bit thicker than the quilting cotton, so I've just gone with the lightweight interfacing on the back of mine. If you want it a little stiffer, of course use 2 layers or a firmer interfacing, but don't go crazy like the old prototype here and have a fold over bag that doesn't fold over. So I've also got obviously my pattern pieces. There's this piece here. This is going to be our contrast trim on the back of our bag, which is going to go across here with the zipper. This is optional, so if you don't want to have this on the back, you can just skip this piece altogether. I've also got 2 zips. This one here is going to be for my outer pocket. It's just a straightforward nylon zipper, and it's a bit longer than it needs to be. This one here is a metal zipper. I found that the extra weight from the metal zipper is important because it really is going to make the top fall over rather than stand up. So again, you can use a nylon zipper if you want to, but a metal one with the more weight seems a better option for making the top fold over like you want it to. Okay, so let's get started with our sewing. So the first thing we're going to make is the contrast zipper strip on the back of the bag. If you don't want the contrast strip or you don't want the zipper, then you can skip this piece. It really is optional. So you'll need the back of your bag, also your pattern template piece, and your contrast band. So the pattern template has little lines across here, which are the guides where our contrast strip is going to go, and I've just used those guides to mark within the seam allowance on either side where we need to line up our contrast band. Then on the band itself, you'll notice I've got two horizontal lines, one here and one here, and these are both a 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric. One of them is a stitching line, the other is a fold line, so I've folded that one and pressed it. And now we're going to take the strip up here to the top of the bag and match the stitching line with the little marks that we've got on the bag just here. I don't have obviously some pins that I'm going to use. I'm just going to clip mine with a couple of wonder clips to clip it in place, and then sew along this stitching line here to attach the contrast strip to the back of our bag. So that gives us a nice start, and now with this line here we can just fold down on that stitching line, and that's going to give us a nice even finish just here. So now top stitch along the top just here close to the edge of the fold, and then do the same on this lower seam. Make sure it's all smoothed out and looking nice and even, and then top stitch close to this fold, and you'll have your contrast strip in place. So now it's time to think about inserting this zipper pocket in the back of the bag just here, and I've created my little template. So I've measured the fabric, found the center, I've just marked myself some guidelines just inside these lines of stitches, and then what I've sewn right in the middle between the two lines of stitches here is a rectangle which is a 1/2 inch wide by 6 inches long, and this is going to form the gap on the outside of our bag to put the zip. So because mine is vinyl, I really need to trim some of this away. If you're using yours with a fabric, you won't need to. So I'm just going to start very carefully, see if I can get my seam ripper in there and make a start through the vinyl, but not cut through there. That's good. Hopefully I can get my scissors in. Might need to cut that a little bit more. So I'm going to carry on with this. I'm going to do it, take my time and do it carefully so that I don't make a mess. And then I'll come back when I've got my rectangle cut out. Again, if you aren't using vinyl, if you're just using regular fabric, then you don't need to cut out because you won't have so many thick layers to sew through. So now it's time to work more on this pocket. I've got my pocket lining piece just here, and along the top I've just marked a line which is 1 inch down from the top of the pocket lining, and I've centered it centered between the two side seams, and this 1 inch line runs along the top of my contrast panel. Now I can't use pins for mine because it's vinyl, so I've just stuck it in place temporarily with a few bits of sticky tape. So if we turn over now to the back, if you are not using vinyl, you haven't got this cutout area, but you have the marked area, and it's around the edge of the marked area that you'll now sew. So you'll follow the line with a short stitch, say a 2, and stitch around this line. If you're using vinyl like I have, exactly the same, but we're just going to stitch exactly on the inside so that we aren't sewing through the vinyl itself, and it just saves us a little bit of extra thickness. So I'm going to sew through there now, and then we can move on to creating the rest of this pocket. So the pocket lining is now stitched into this contrast panel, and if you look closely you'll see that I've drawn a line right along the length of the rectangle here around the halfway mark, and at the ends I've drawn just a little triangle right from the centre into the corners. And if we start off, I've just started off with my seam ripper, and we're going to cut through both layers, through the pocket, through the lining and the contrast panel here, and follow along this line. So I'm following along this central line. When I get to the corners, I'm just going to snip up into the corners, nice and close obviously, but not through those stitches. Same again on these corners. Nice and close but not through. And now we're going to post our lining fabric out through the other side. So the top part and the bottom part both get pulled through to the wrong side. I'll end up with a nice liner for our pocket. So if you turn over now to the wrong side, obviously it looks a bit of a mess, but if you take this over to the ironing board and just carefully pull these pieces out and press them, The corners here are always going to be a little bit creased, but don't worry about that, it's going to be on the inside and no one but the fairies will be able to get their heads in there. And then around the outside you'll probably end up with just a slight line showing of your lining fabric, just as a little bit of a contrast around these edges. So make sure it's all nice and neat and give it a good press. If you don't want to have this contrast, then you should use the same fabric for the lining as your pocket as you have on the outside, and then it won't be quite so obvious that you have just that little bit of contrast there. But I actually like that, so I'm happy to go with a different lining for my pocket. So I'm going to give this a good press, make it all nice and neat inside and out as best I can, and then we'll have a look at sewing in the zipper. So it's time to add our zipper into this nice gap that we've created on the back of the bag here. I've got some wonder tape along the edge of mine. Obviously I can't use pins anyway. Well, I suppose I could here because the vinyl would be hidden behind the fabric, but even if you do use pins to try and hold your zipper in place around here, it creates like bumps and things, and it's hard to get your zipper in nice and smooth. So you can either hold the zipper in as you sew, or you can use a type of basting glue, or I like to use this wonder tape. It comes on a roll like this, and it's a fusible adhesive designed for fabric, but it also washes out afterwards. So you can use it with it anywhere and then just wash the garment and the whole tape disappears. So I've got it along the edge of my zipper tape here. If I pull off the backing tape, then it's almost clear. If I put it there against the darker fabric, you can probably see it a little bit easier. And it's now got this adhesive tape, so now I can put the zipper on the back of here and it'll hold in place. Most people who are right-handed prefer to have their zipper pull at this end, so if that applies to you, make sure when you turn over that you put the zipper pull at this end. And obviously if your zipper is longer than it needs to be, like mine, make sure that the zipper pull is going to be within the window. Otherwise, if you sew it like this, when you then trim the zipper off afterwards, you're going to trim the pull away and you won't be able to open the zipper. So if we turn it over to the reverse, I'm going to make sure my zipper pull is over this side and within that little window. Butt it right up to this end, and then I can just position it and press down on the wonder tape and it holds it in place. And if I check from the front, I can see how it needs adjusting. So I need to adjust a little bit at that point. I can either do it from the front or the back until I've messed with it and got my zipper in exactly the right place, and then it's time to sew. So you'll sew around the perimeter, pivot at the corners, around again, around here, and stop back where you started. So most of our hard work and the difficult parts in this bag are almost over. We've got this zipper in place. So where you've got any extra and still it's stuck there, you can cut that away as we don't need that anymore. So now do that on both ends. Take this piece off as well. That's all looking nice and neat from the outside. So now we just need to form the rest of this pocket. If you fold the fabric up so that the top matches the bottom, and now if you take it over to the sewing machine and sew through here, across the top and here. But as you do it, you don't want to sew through all layers, because if you just took it to the machine and sewed through there, you'd end up with stitching on the front of the bag. So as you sew, fold that part out of the way and just sew along here. Then fold this part out of the way, sew along the top, and so on until the three sides of your pocket are sewn. So now it's time to start putting things together. And so I've got the back of my bag here. This piece is going to be the front of my bag, and then I have my two flap pieces, and you can decide which way you want the design on your bag to go. I've decided that having the flap coming down over this way looks more pleasing to me than if I had the design the other way. So I've decided that I'm going to sew it that way. So I'll take that piece away, and therefore the flap needs to come over this way on the bag, which means it needs to match up with this piece. So I've got the top edge of the piece here, and the straight edge. Don't sew it with the diagonal edge. This is going to be the flap of the bag. You need to sew it straight edges together. So I'm just going to clip mine because I can't use some pins, and sew the top of the bag, the flat part here, to the bottom along this top edge with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once the two pieces are sewn together along the top, if you press this piece of fabric away so that you get a nice crisp edge just along here, and then top stitch. So you're going to top stitch with your seam allowances facing towards the top of the bag. So when you top stitch through the flap fabric just here, really close to the edge, you'll catch all of those seam allowances. I won't be able to press mine because I'll be worried a little bit about this vinyl, but if you're using a fabric, then press it away neatly and then top stitch. So now our first side is finished. In the same way that we added the flap to the lower part of the bag here, we're going to do the same here. So remember, not the diagonal edge, that's the top of our bag, but these two straight edges are going to be matched right sides together and then sewn along here with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then fold this back and you're going to top stitch the same as you did for the front of the bag through all the layers on the top flap of the bag. Now that we have both of our pieces trued up and we know they're both the same size and shape, we can use our pieces to use as templates for our lining. So I've now got my lining fabric just here, and of course these are opposites to each other. You see how the diagonal goes different on each way. So we need to cut two lining pieces which are going to match. So you'll cut one with this piece and then you'll cut one lining piece with this piece. And you'll just cut all the way around the outside. What I like to do with my linings is cut them all exactly the same, but then take off a 1/2 inch from the bottom. Because of course we know the laws of physics tell us that the inside of a bag is going to be smaller than the outside. And I don't like to feel down in the bottom of the bag to rummage around for things and find that there's great big bunches of leftover fabric there. So when you've cut your template, it's up to you of course, but you may like to just cut a 1/2 inch off the bottom of your lining just to make it a little bit more shorter so you haven't got too much on the inside. Then in terms of interfacing, I'm going to use a very light apparel interfacing on here because remember what we said about earlier, we don't want to make things too bulky so that the top doesn't fold over and just stands up straight. So I'll use a very light apparel interfacing, and then next step is for us to sew our zipper. So before I start sewing everything together, I need to think about how I'm going to attach the strap. Now with this fold over bag, if you don't want to have a strap at all and just use it as a clutch, of course you can, but I'm giving just a few ideas if you do want to include a strap into the sides. So I need to have a look at your D-rings. Mine are 3/4 of an inch. Thank you, Kat, stop scratching the fabric. The clip on the inside here is 3/4 of an inch, so you need 4 times the width of that with your fabric. So I've cut a piece which is 3 inches wide. If your D-rings were a different size, then cut your piece of fabric 4 times as wide. So normally what you would do is fold it in half and make a crease, fold these sides into the center like this and press, and then fold again into the center like this to hide all those raw edges. But my suede really doesn't press very well, so I've got just a slightly different solution. Using this Wonder Tape that we used before, I've just added a little strip down the sides here, and then I can fold into the center and match up, and it's going to hold that in place. And then I've added another strip just here, so now I can fold those edges together. There we go. Now when I take this over to the sewing machine, although I've not pressed it originally, it's going to stay in place nicely enough in order for me to just sew close to the edge down these 2 folded ends, and that will create my nice piece that the little D-ring on the bag is going to go into, like that. So that will be fine. So if you're using a fabric that doesn't press very well, like this one does, then do use this Wonder Tape or something similar, because that will really work. Otherwise, just give it a good press, fold it like I've shown, and then sew that down each of the long ends with your sewing machine. So now I have my little tab pieces sewn, and I've just folded them in half, and don't forget at this point to put your D-ring or your O-ring on, or whichever you're using, because if you forget then it won't be very easy to put that on afterwards. So I've folded it in half, put the D-ring in place, and then I've just measured 1 inch from here and drawn myself a guideline, and we want the little tab to go just in this point just here, so level with the fabric just there like this. And the 1 inch guideline that I have is just going to fall on the edge of the outer fabric just here. So we'll do this on either side, and then you just need to baste the little tab there in place within the seam allowance. We have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so if you did something around 1/4 inch, that would just baste that in place here, and then do exactly the same on the other side with your other little clip. And then if you want to add a strap or something, you can do. So it's time to sew the zip into our bag, and the first thing we need to think about is the orientation of our zip. So if I just lie the bag out like it will be once it's sewn, it's going to be like this with my flap coming down in this direction, and I will like my zip so that it orients this way, so that the opening part will be here, and I'll open it and close it in this direction. So I'll remember that when I come to sew my zip onto the fabric. So if I take this piece out of the way, I need the zipper pull to be at the farthest point just here. So if I turn those over, I'm going to line my zip up along this raw edge just here. A couple of clips just temporarily, and then my lining piece will go on there over the top. So I have my zipper face down, which means that the pull on the zipper, the right side of the zipper, is facing the right side of the fabric, and then over the top I'm going to put my lining, and again the right sides will match. Ooh, bit of glue stuck there. So the right side of my lining matches the right side of the fabric here. I'm just going to pop that over on the top, adjust my clips so that all 3 of those layers on the diagonal are now lined up along that edge, and then I'll take this to the sewing machine and just sew with my zipper foot from one side to the other. So that's my zipper sewn on the first side. Time to do that again. So if we take the other side, right side up, match it right side up with our other piece of fabric here. So I'm going to match right sides together. Pop a couple of clips to just hold that for now, because we need to, I'm just going to make sure that tape's lined up the same as it is on our other piece. So I've got it exactly the same, it's going to be even. And then my lining piece again goes on the top, so right sides of the lining are now matching. Match up those points there, match up these raw edges along the zipper, and now I'm going to sew along the other side of the zipper, and that will be it in place. Okay, I'll go and do that. I'll see you back here in a minute. Once your zipper is sewn in place, you want to smooth your lining and your outer fabrics away from the zipper in both directions, and give this a nice press so that that stays nice and smooth and open, and then take it over to the sewing machine and top stitch along the edge of the fabric here, and that will keep the fabric away from the zipper. Also, while you do it, make sure to pull the lining away nice and taut so that the lining isn't going to get caught in your zipper there either. So we really are almost done with our bag now. It's time to match and sew around the perimeter. So I've got the 2 lining fabrics matched right sides together. Now don't forget that you need to undo your zipper at this point, so at least halfway, or you're going to find it very hard to turn and get inside your bag later on. So remember to undo your zipper and then match your lining fabrics and your outer fabrics. For my vinyl here, I've used some clips just to hold those in place, and where I have the seams matching here and here, I've done my best to make sure that those are going to match up as neatly as I can. I mean, obviously, you know, things shift, don't they, when you sew, but I'll do my best. And then around the outside here where the fabric part are, I'm going to continue pinning around the outside. We do need to leave a gap in the bottom of the lining so that we can turn the whole thing out later on. So I've just put 2 pins just here to remind me, and then I'll continue pinning round. And then if you sew around here with your 1/2 inch seam allowance, you should be fine. Do watch out for the metal parts of your zipper. You don't obviously want to hit the metal parts here or at this other end with your needle, because the needle will break. However, if you have used the 10-inch zipper in the same that I have left plenty of room at either end, so you should be absolutely fine in getting past those metal parts. But again, obviously do take care. Okay, so now complete the sewing around the perimeter, leave the gap just here, and then we'll turn the whole thing right side out. Before you turn your bag the other way, you may just want to reduce some of the bulk in the seams. So take away from your corners, both on the outer fabric and the lining, and at the point where the zippers are, you can cut off the excess zipper tape here now, because you won't be needing that anymore, and then we should be ready to turn the bag inside out. So I'll do mine and let's see what it looks like. So my bag's turned the right way out and I've closed the gap in the bottom of the lining. So all that we now need to do is close up the zipper, allow that to fold over down to the front, add on my handle, there we go, and our bag is completed. So thank you very much for following along with this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed making this bag, and I look forward to seeing you over at Sew So Easy again soon, and hopefully we can share a lot more fun sewing projects and experiences. Thanks very much for watching.